This is one of those classic cautionary tales, a story about how a tech titan, a name that really was the very definition of talking online, just kind of vanished. Today, we're diving deep into the rise and the spectacular fall of Skype.
It's honestly hard to overstate just how completely Skype owned the entire landscape. You didn't video call someone, you Skyped them. I mean, the name literally became a verb, right up there with Googling something. And that's what makes its disappearing act one of the most baffling stories in all of modern tech.
And right here, this is the ultimate, most tragic irony of this whole story. Skype was founded way back in 2003. That means it had a 17-year head start on the single biggest catalyst for video calls in human history, the 2020 remote work boom. It was perfectly positioned to become an essential global utility. And yet, when the world needed it most, it just completely dropped the ball.
So, yeah, what on earth happened? How does a company that has a near monopoly on an entire way we communicate get so totally dismantled? Well, this isn't a simple story. It's a really complex and frankly dramatic tale of amazing technology getting just completely undone by this toxic mix of corporate mismanagement, crippling technical debt, and a fatal identity crisis.
To really get the fall, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the disruptive, kind of revolutionary idea that started this whole thing. Skype was founded back in 2003 by Nicholas Zenstrom and Jonas Fries, and its launch wasn't just a launch, it was an absolute explosion. 10,000 downloads on its very first day. And in just a couple of years, it had hundreds of millions of users, all with basically zero marketing budget. The growth was so insane that by 2005, eBay came knocking and just snapped it up for a staggering $2.6 billion. Now, after that relationship went south, it even had this brief, successful return to being independent in 2009. Yeah, the golden era was definitely in full swing. Okay, so the absolute genius behind Skype's early success was its architecture, its secret sauce. See, the founders had pioneered this thing called peer-to-peer, or P2P, with their last venture, the infamous file-sharing service Kazaa. With P2P, instead of building these huge, expensive server farms, Skype cleverly turned every single user's computer into a tiny little node in its own network.
And this was the big disruption. You had the traditional phone companies spending billions on physical infrastructure, charging you dollars per minute for international calls. Skype's peer-to-peer model meant its operating costs were practically zero, which let them offer those same calls for free. And the really brilliant part, the more users it got, the stronger the network became. It was just this perfect recipe for viral exponential growth.
With that massive $2.6 billion eBay deal, well, it turned out to be a total disaster. The grand vision was that buyers and sellers on eBay would use Skype to, video chat about whatever they were selling. But they just fundamentally misunderstood their users. People liked the anonymity of the marketplace. The idea of a forced, super awkward video call with a complete stranger was the exact opposite of what anybody wanted. That synergy just never happened, and it revealed this huge, fundamental mismatch of cultures.
So let's move to the next chapter, where an even bigger giant steps into the picture and makes a bet that would, ultimately seal Skype's fate. Then, in 2011, Microsoft sent shockwaves through the entire tech industry. They acquired Skype for a mind-boggling $8.5 billion. The strategy was pretty clear. Integrate Skype into absolutely everything. Put it in Microsoft Office, make it the communication hub for the struggling Windows Phone, bake it into the Xbox. This was going to be Microsoft's killer app, their big weapon against Google and Apple. But Microsoft immediately hit a massive technical wall. That revolutionary P2P architecture, the very thing that made Skype so nimble and cheap to run, was a total nightmare for a company like Microsoft that needs control, that needs to monitor things. So they made a really fateful decision to rip out Skype's decentralized soul and move the whole thing onto their own centralized cloud servers. An insider famously described the process as rebuilding the plane while we were flying it.
And for us, the users, that transition was just brutal. All of a sudden, this once rock-solid app was a complete mess. Calls dropped all the time, messages would show up hours late, or even worse, completely out of order. And then there was the most infamous problem of all, the notification storm. You'd get the same notification, buzzing on your phone, your tablet, and your laptop, all at the same time, for a message you'd already read hours ago. In a really short time, Skype's hard-won reputation for just working was completely shattered.
So, with the technical foundation just crumbling, the next phase of the disaster started to unfold, a complete and total loss of identity. Microsoft, kind of panicking,
got obsessed with chasing trends. Instead of fixing the core reliability issues that were making everyone mad, they decided the answer was to make Skype more like Snapchat. The whole focus shifted, away from being a simple, clean, reliable calling app to being this cluttered, confusing social media wannabe.
The user backlash was immediate, and it was severe. The 2017 redesign introduced this feature called Highlights, a blatant Snapchat Stories clone that absolutely no one was asking for. It totally alienated Skype's core users, the professionals and the legacy users who actually relied on it. The App Store ratings just plummeted almost overnight. It was a crystal clear signal that Microsoft had no idea who its audience was anymore.
And all these useless new features made the application incredibly heavy. It became a notorious resource hog, just devouring CPU and draining batteries on laptops and phones at an alarming rate. And to make things even worse, these forced, deep integrations with Windows 10 made it incredibly difficult to even close the application, which just spread even more resentment from users. At the same time, Microsoft was creating this massive brand confusion. On one hand, you had the regular Skype, now bloated with emojis and Snapchat clones. And on the other, they rebranded their separate corporate tool, Link, as Skype for Business. These were two totally different products, built by different teams with totally different goals. It just fractured the user base and completely diluted what the Skype brand even meant. And as Skype was stumbling, just bleeding user trust, a new generation of focused, nimble competitors, they saw their opening. First up was Discord. While Skype was becoming this unusable resource hog, Discord focused on one thing, being lightweight and super fast. It was the perfect tool for gamers who needed to talk in the background without slowing down their games. And it felt like almost overnight, Discord just captured the entire gaming community, a massive and really influential group that Skype used to completely own.
And then came the real giant killer, Zoom. Zoom's entire philosophy was the polar opposite of where Skype was going. It was built to be frictionless. You didn't need an account, you didn't have to log in, you just clicked a single link and it worked. Every single time. While Skype was becoming known for freezing and login problems, Zoom just established itself as the new gold standard for reliability and quality.
And on the business side of things, the poor, beleaguered Skype for Business was getting squeezed out by the popular upstart Slack and, in a perfect twist of irony, by Microsoft's own new darling, Microsoft Teams. The company was now literally competing with itself, and it was pretty clear which product was going to win that fight.
Which brings us to the climax of this whole tragedy. The one moment in history that should have been Skype's coronation, but instead it became its funeral.
In early 2020, the world just shut down. And suddenly, video calling wasn't a novelty anymore. It was the essential fabric connecting work, family, all of society. It was the ultimate unexpected stress test for every single communication platform on the planet.
And Skype failed that test spectacularly. Despite having universal name recognition built up over nearly 2 decades, all those years of feature bloat, unreliability, and brand confusion meant it just wasn't up to the task when we all needed it most. And within a matter of weeks, the entire cultural zeitgeist, the verb itself, it shifted. Let's Skype became let's Zoom. It was a complete and total defeat.
The final nail in the coffin came from inside its own house. Microsoft saw the writing on the wall. They officially shifted all their key resources and marketing muscle away from the dying consumer version of Skype and put everything behind their new enterprise champion, Microsoft Teams. And just like that, Skype was officially a legacy product, still maintained but no longer relevant to the future.
The story of Skype is such a powerful and enduring lesson for the tech world. It teaches us that no amount of market dominance, no amount of brand recognition can save a product that forgets who its users are and what they fundamentally need. It's just a stark reminder that true innovation and corporate expansion can never, ever come at the cost of core usability and the trust of your users.